Please, could we start? We don't have much time. We are already a bit delayed. Good afternoon and warm welcome to all of you joining us for this panel discussion with the Rome-based organization on the Coalition of Indigenous Peoples Food Systems. I want to introduce myself first. My name is Lola Garcia-Lix, and I am the Senior Advisor on Global Governance for the International Workgroup for Indigenous Affairs, an international human rights NGO working on the promotion and the protection of Indigenous people's rights all over the world. First of all, I want to thank IFAD for hosting this panel in the context of the 6th Global Meeting of the Indigenous Peoples Forum at IFAD. The forum is indeed a great opportunity for gathering Indigenous leaders, Rome-based and UN agencies and member states representatives to interact openly and frankly under the frame of the Coalition on Indigenous Peoples Food Systems. Before we start with the panel, I would just give two highlights on the background of the coalition. I know we have two honorable speakers after me that will go more into that. But just to mention that in 2021, a group of 7 countries, Canada, the Dominican Republic, Finland, Mexico, New Zealand, Norway, and Spain, Indigenous leaders, the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, and FAO, created a coalition on Indigenous Peoples Food System. This coalition was officially launched during the World Food Day week in October 2022. The coalition offers and must offer a space for collaborative work to advance on policies and normative work related to Indigenous people's food and knowledge system, not only at international level, but at national and regional level too. The coalition is also an opportunity to all to integrate key initiatives led by different UN agencies into a consolidated and coordinated effort to protect and promote Indigenous people's food and knowledge system. During the panel, we would like to hear from all our panelists about how they plan to support the work of the coalition, enhance cooperation and synergies, and identify concrete actions. How do we move the coalition from the structure to the action? So I will now start with the first part of this panel, which is the presentation of the Coalition on Indigenous Peoples Food System. And for that, we are very honored, and I would like to welcome, and I pass to Spanish. Doy la bienvenida y es un gran honor para nosotros contar con su excelencia Miguel Jorge García Winder, embajador y representante permanente de México ante las agencias de Naciones Unidas en Roma. Por favor, señor embajador.
Lola, muchas gracias. Lola, thank you so much. I think we share the same last name. Hopefully my grandfather line is as smart as your grandfather line. So thank you. And secondly, I feel very honored to be here. It's really a privilege and a very humble experience to be with you. If you look at the table, you look, I'm the only one who wears a coat and a tie. So you are right. I'm probably the only bureaucrat in here. And hopefully as a bureaucrat, I can help a little bit to advance the interests of our Indigenous brothers and sisters. Lola, before I start on what I think should be a roundtable for forward thinking and to think out of the box and to create new ideas about the future of the coalition, I would like to recognize the very important role of the Indigenous peoples in the consolidation of this coalition. The idea came from the indigenous people. The idea was a seed that you presented during the Food Summit, and it has taken 2 years to basically to germinate and to have a little. I think we have a little plant coming out of the soil at this particular time. So the indigenous, this process that the indigenous peoples took is a very democratic process. It was a very inclusive process. But most importantly, it shows that the coalition is indigenous people owned. It's not owned by no one in particular, but by the indigenous people. And that, I think, is a great achievement on the preparation of this coalition. The second thing that I want to recognize, and I see that they are at the other side of the room, is the tireless effort of the country, starting by Canada, because Canada planted the first seed of the group of friends many years ago before I came. So Canada, New Zealand, Dominican Republic, Spain, Finland, Norway, and my own country have committed to participate and to strengthen this coalition and to make it move forward. The good news is that today we have Panama here, and I use Panama as an indicator that there are a lot of countries that in the last, I would say the last 2 months, have increased their interest to participate with us, either in the coalition or in the group of friends for the indigenous people. So that's a great news. Also, it's important to recognize the role of the UN agencies, the Secretariat. I think the Secretariat led by John, when all the hope it was dying, John was able to keep us moving. I don't want to show you all the messages and texts that I have from John. Sometimes they were late at night, early in the morning, to tell me that I need to work more for the indigenous people. So John, thank you, and to the agencies. I think today's call to this meeting is particularly relevant of the commitment that the agencies and IFAD is having, and I think that's a big plus that I didn't see in the last 2 years. So thank you so much in behalf of the coalition. Let me highlight the coalition. The coalition has been built on an inclusive process. And that, I think, is the most important part. It doesn't represent one individual, one country, one group. It has been a very long process of negotiation. I think La Doctora Cunningham and Roy, among other people, Francisco, Tanya, has been very instrumental in this process. Roy started this process when he had hair, and through all the negotiation had lost most of his hair. Roy, thank you so much, because I've been really an inclusive. I make this as a joke, but this has been an inclusive. It has taken time. It has taken effort to concede, to negotiate, and I think we have a good product. The second thing that I want to highlight is that coalition is not intended to address the entire issue of indigenous peoples. That will be foolish. That will be the beginning of the disaster of the coalition. Through this process, we have been able to maintain the coalition focusing on 2 things, and allow me to read them. 2 objectives are in this coalition. First one is to strengthen, increase the recognition, and promote respect for indigenous people food systems across the world. That's the first objective. Strengthen, increase recognition, promote respect for indigenous people food systems across the world. The second objective is to disseminate and scale up traditional knowledge and best practice from indigenous people's food systems with the potential to transform global food systems at large. Allow me to repeat it. Disseminate and scale up traditional knowledge and best practice from indigenous people's food systems with the potential to transform global food systems at large. Basically, 2 ideas are in here. One is we need to increase our knowledge, we need to increase our recognition, and we need to work together to bring generations to rescue indigenous people food systems. The other objective is of greater ambition. And I think that's what it makes special this coalition. We believe that indigenous people food systems have intrinsically knowledge and values that can help to transform the rest of food systems. It's not one or the other. It's the construction of a better world by rescuing the knowledge and the values of indigenous food people. And I think these two things are very important because the coalition had agreed on a clear pathway forward. There is a document that has specific objectives, that has specific actions, and that has a clear pathway for the coalition. I'm saying this because it brings me to the question of today's discussion, is how does the UN agencies can help? How can these agencies help? And this is my personal view. I hope my colleagues from the countries can increase and share with us your opinion. But my opinion is the way that you can help is if you align your strategies to the coalition. And don't expect the coalition to align to your strategies. It's not a game of words. It's a very profound difference. If you do not align your lines of work to help on these two objectives, the coalition will be nothing but a good desire and a good dream that dies like every dream in 30 seconds. So that's the way we need to move forward. It requires a new way of thinking. It requires a new exercise. And why is important that the agencies align their strategies is because the coalition is built on indigenous people proposals, needs, and knowledge. It doesn't respond to Miguel's interest, it responds to the indigenous people system. And I think that's a critical event. That, in my mind, is the most important transformation if we want to make this coalition. There are other three things that I see that you can help, but they are minor things. One is you can help the steering committee, which, by the way, is composed by indigenous people from the 7 biocultural regions of the world and the 7 countries that we have been working on advancing the coalition. If you help this steering committee to develop a system for monitoring progress and timely decision making. And that system of monitoring requires also that allows us to understand how the coalition has been incorporated in the national pathways. That, I think, is critical, and we need your support to do this. Second, if you can help the coalition and the steering committee to create a successful portfolio of projects to address these issues. We need your help so we can have access to successful projects. And finally, I think you have seriously to commit resources and activities for the coalition. If we don't do that, and again, I believe the coalition will be a good dream. Last Saturday, I was walking around Rome, and near the Colosseum, there was a sign, one of these religious signs, that said, "What the future will bring." And while I was walking with my wife, I started thinking about that question: what will the future bring? If I read every morning the reports coming from WFP, World Food Program, from FAO, from IFAD, and from many other agencies, I probably will stay in bed because they are depressive. We will have more hunger. We will have more loss of biodiversity. We will have more exclusion of indigenous people. We will have the exclusion of women and girls. And that's the panorama that we think. However, because I very optimistic, especially in the mornings, and I think about my children, my grandchildren, and if God's allow me, probably my great-grandchildren, I believe that we can create a better world. So what the future will bring, in my view, is a better world. And I believe that the fertilizer, and I really believe that a transformative force to create this better world come out of the indigenous people knowledge. That's what I'm here. That's what I have spent 2.5 years of my life, not being an indigenous people, because I am not an indigenous person, committed to make this place a better world working with you. And hopefully they will promote a conversation today outside the traditional box. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, for your inspiring speech here and for your optimism. I think hope is a very important component, but I think the ownership of the coalition by indigenous peoples, your reference to the ownership, it's very important. The efforts of states and the commitment of UN agencies are at the core of the future work of the coalition, and also for bringing the way forward, bringing some concrete recommendations. And I think particularly with regard to the alignment of the policies of and programs of the UN agencies to the coalition. So which is also very important to see it, as you said, the other way around. So thank you very much for your contribution. And it is also an enormous pleasure and honor to introduce Darío Mejía Montalvo, the president of the chair of the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. And Darío, I don't know if you can share with us also from your perspective and in your position as a chair of the Permanent Forum, some kind of your thoughts about the coalition on indigenous peoples' food systems. Please, Darío, the floor is yours.
Buenas tardes. Muchas gracias, Lola, por la presentación. También muchas gracias a las agencias por esta invitación a conversar sobre este tan importante tema. Y después de haber escuchado aquí a Miguel, bueno, no quiere que le diga embajador, mi estimado Miguel, pues uno queda como pensando, ¿y ahora yo qué digo? Porque creo que ha sido muy inspirador en su presentación. Yo quisiera complementar algunas cosas muy generales. Creo que las grandes dificultades que enfrentamos como humanidad y recientemente la pandemia quizás que aún nos acompaña ha sido una de esas pruebas que nos llevan a descubrir que muchas de las cosas sobre las cuales nos movemos en realidad son creencias. Por ejemplo, a nosotros desde siempre nos han enseñado que los recursos naturales son infinitos y que la creatividad es muy finita. En consecuencia, aquello que es abundante vale menos y que lo que es escaso vale más. Entonces, los recursos naturales, al ser infinitos, su valor tiende a cero, a costar menos, y por eso los podemos agotar y agotar. Y que las ideas, por ejemplo, la creatividad humana es escasa, que no se encuentra en cualquier lado y por eso cuesta más. Y estos temas de propiedad intelectual cada vez son más costosos. La propiedad sobre las semillas, creo que sobre eso ustedes conocen mucho, pero la pandemia nos demostró que es al contrario, que los recursos de la naturaleza realmente son escasos y que sobre todo el recurso que a nosotros nos decían que era infinito se ha convertido en el recurso más escaso ahora. No siempre nos han dicho, el tiempo es infinito. Pero resulta que ahora nos está demostrando la ciencia que ese es uno de los que menos tenemos. Tenemos realmente poco tiempo. Y por el contrario, lo que nos decían que era muy escaso, que eran las ideas, durante la pandemia nos demostró la humanidad, nos ha demostrado que la capacidad creativa del ser humano no tiene límites. Lo vimos con los pueblos indígenas recurriendo a sus orígenes con la medicina, con sus alimentos, con sus mecanismos de protección territorial, con una cantidad de inventos. Nos encontramos hoy día por Zoom, otras herramientas virtuales. El ser humano ha desplegado una enorme capacidad creativa para responder de manera hábil. Y esto nos está demostrando que justamente estas tesis eran una creencia. Nos hemos movido mucho sobre creencias. Digo esto al iniciar esta conversación porque detrás de la convocatoria de la Cumbre Mundial de Alimentación realizada por las Naciones Unidas, en parte también estaba esta idea. La idea de fortalecer el control de los alimentos desde una perspectiva nutricional. Porque ha sido lo que ha venido campeando por la humanidad durante estas últimas 2 centurias. Sin embargo, cuando dentro de las discusiones de la Cumbre de Alimentos convocado por la Secretaría de las Naciones Unidas, los pueblos indígenas plantearon el desafío de que hay otras visiones distintas de la alimentación. Y para los pueblos indígenas, la discusión sobre nutrición no se remite a los nutrientes químicos o biológicos que necesita el ser humano, sino que va mucho más allá y aparece siempre la discusión de la integralidad. La alimentación para los pueblos indígenas no es solo fisiológica, es también espiritual, es también cultural, es también territorial, porque los asuntos de la alimentación están estrechamente relacionados con el cuidado de la salud, con la administración de las enfermedades, con las formas como se educa a las presentes y futuras generaciones y también cómo se mantienen y conservan los idiomas, los nombres propios y así una cantidad de elementos interrelacionados. Pues esto es lo que subyace a pensarse una forma de la alimentación distinta, porque la humanidad, por el camino que lleva, no nos está garantizando ni aquello que ha prometido en los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible, hambre cero, sino que por el contrario le está apuntando es al exterminio de formas distintas de producir alimentación integral. Los sistemas de conocimiento cada vez más amenazados por una forma particular de observar el mundo. De manera que con estas discusiones previas, nosotros cuando llegamos a esta instancia donde nos encontramos en el foro permanente, ya se habían desarrollado gran parte de estas discusiones y nos encontramos, por fortuna, que ya se había pensado por los pueblos indígenas la creación de una coalición de sistemas alimentarios de los pueblos indígenas con esta perspectiva integral. Tuvimos que nosotros recibir este informe, celebramos como foro permanente la creación y atendimos el llamado de los pueblos indígenas a contribuir en la labor de su fortalecimiento. Bien, con eso en mente, nosotros lo que hemos venido haciendo simplemente es acompañar, impulsar la labor que los pueblos indígenas están planteando alrededor de la coalición. Por supuesto, hay que agradecerle a los países que han tenido paciencia y que han tenido mucha convicción en entender la coalición como una oportunidad para llevar una estrategia concreta de desarrollar políticas públicas al interior de los países, que es donde están ubicados los pueblos indígenas, sus territorios, y que esas políticas públicas estén orientadas a diversificar la manera como se conciben los asuntos de la alimentación en cada región, aumentando el reconocimiento de los sistemas alimentarios de los pueblos indígenas y estableciendo diálogos permanentes, porque solo a través del diálogo efectivo y concreto se puede transformar las actuales políticas que nos están llevando hacia una crisis integral como sociedades. Bien, yo quería compartir estas ideas con ustedes. Sé que hemos tenido poco tiempo, pero quiero, ya para ir finalizando, decir que la coalición debemos verla como una plataforma también de coordinación entre las agencias. Este es el llamado reiterado que hemos hecho desde el foro permanente en la necesidad de no compartimentalizar a los pueblos indígenas a pesar de los mandatos que tiene cada agencia, porque eso también hay que entenderlo. Efectivamente, tienen mandatos específicos, pero eso no limita la posibilidad de articularse y coordinarse, que ha sido gran parte del contenido que se ha desarrollado en las discusiones de estos 2 días que hemos tenido. De manera que es una gran oportunidad para que nos articulemos a propósito de los temas que enfrentamos de manera común: cambio climático, pérdida de la biodiversidad, pero ante todo la necesidad de impulsar a los pueblos indígenas como sujetos colectivos de derecho en soluciones concretas que aportan al mundo en este momento. Muchas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, Darío, por tus palabras y por tu reflexión. Por ejemplo, el compartir el tema de la integralidad de las visiones sobre la alimentación, de los sistemas alimentarios de los pueblos indígenas y la contribución que esto puede y debe hacer a la humanidad en estos momentos de crisis. Y luego también has enfatizado la necesidad de avanzar a través del diálogo, y que a través de un diálogo será la única manera de afrontar la actual crisis global. Y el rol que el foro permanente puede cumplir en esto, que no tengo ninguna duda que puede cumplir un papel fundamental en esta plataforma de coordinación que tú llamabas, del trabajo de las agencias y de otros organismos de Naciones Unidas también, como es el foro permanente. Muchísimas gracias, Darío. So we go to the second part of this panel, which we have 3 panelists with us today. I will present each of them when I give them the floor. I will start by welcoming Palak Chakma, who is an indigenous rights activist from the Chittagong Hill Tracts, Bangladesh. He is the representative from Asia at the International Land Coalition Global Council and member of the steering committee of the Indigenous Peoples Forum at IFAD. Palak, I have a question that I have for you, for Mirna, and for Frank, if you can frame your few minutes around the answer about that question. How do you see the coalition enabling collaboration among Rome-based UN organizations, indigenous peoples, of course, states, but also other possible actors? Could you share with us your ideas, your views, or recommendations on what kind of action is required, or how do you see the way forward? Please, Palak, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Lola. First of all, I would like to express our gratitude and sincere thanks to 7 member states: Mexico, New Zealand, Canada, Finland, Norway, Dominican Republic, and Spain for taking the initiative to setting up the coalition. At the same time, I also like to thank the agencies, UN agencies, UNPFII, Global Hub, FAO, WFP, and IFAD to join in this platform and encouraging indigenous people for upholding or promoting the rights of indigenous people in the arena of food system. As I am representing here both IFAD Steering Committee at the IPForum and also International Land Coalition. So you know the International Land Coalition is working all over the world, from membership from different civil society organizations, intergovernmental organizations, and UN agencies. So the topmost priority of International Land Coalition is to ensure land tenure of indigenous peoples. This is one of the priority areas. In that point, here I would like to share the importance of indigenous people contribution in food system. The world's dominant food systems are contributors to the current social, environmental, and economic crises that are affecting the entire planet: food insecurity, biodiversity loss, climate change, soil erosion, deforestation, and conflict. On the other hand, indigenous people, food and knowledge systems are ecologically sustainable, resilient, nutritious, equitable, and self-determined. Indigenous peoples have been and continue to be vital to agriculture, innovation, global food security, and health and well-being of diverse and resilient societies. And the issue of food is linked with health. This was also described by my earlier panelist, Honorable Chair of UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. So we can see that how indigenous people's knowledge and practices and way of life is important for sustainable food system. Here, as Lola asked me how we want to see the coalition, what we expect from coalitions. So in that case, I have only 3 words. One is engagement, number 2 is partnership, and number 3 is action. We want engagement at all levels with the help of this coalition. We want engagement of indigenous leadership. We want engagement of indigenous women, indigenous youth at different decision-making level. And this should be engagement of meaningful engagement, not the token participation or engagement. And to this end, we encourage and we expect these UN agencies and states will facilitate dialogue at country level, at regional level, so that indigenous people can attend and participate in those dialogues and raise their issues collectively, and so that we as a team, as a whole, can contribute in our overall struggle. And we want partnership. The coalition can take initiative to bring indigenous peoples on board and build partnerships. So working at local level, we need resources. So by establishing partnership with UN agencies, by establishing partnership with indigenous peoples and states, by establishing partnership with indigenous peoples and donor agencies, we can establish this partnership and can contribute meaningful way. And finally, action. What we are discussing here at global level, at regional level, and local level, so everything will bring result if we can start working, if we can initiate actions. So we really look forward, this coalition will initiate action-oriented works at regional level, and that will help us to bring our issues in the discussion table, to work together behind our aspirations. And also, finally, here we are encouraged, and this is very encouraging for us that another state, Panama, is here as the Honorable His Excellency Chair. So we expect from this coalition to invite more and more member states and encourage them to join in this coalition, so that this group will grow bigger, and it will influence other states day by day, and we all together bring changes what we really want to happen. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you very much, Palap, and thank you for being so concrete and to respond to my question about what do you expect from the coalition: enrichment, partnership, and action. So thank you very much. We have to be very careful with the time. I have received a small note that we need to finish at 3:30. So we have 45 minutes for the rest of the event. So I will ask all of you who are panelists and those who would like to later on to be in the open dialogue to be very, very concrete and very short, unfortunately. I think we could discuss that issue for many hours more, but that is the real world. I'm honored also now and very, very pleased to welcome Myrna Cunningham. La doctora Myrna Cunningham creo que no necesita de demasiada introducción. Creo que todos los presentes conocemos. Myrna ha sido uno de los agentes principales en la creación también de la coalición, que como ya lo mencionó el señor embajador. Myrna es la presidenta del grupo directivo del comité del Foro de los Pueblos Indígenas en el FIDA y es miembro de la directiva de del IPAF, el programa de asistencia de proyectos para pueblos indígenas del FIDA. Myrna, es un placer y no sé si quieres que vuelva a repetir la pregunta, pero más que nada es cuáles son tus ideas sobre qué acciones se deberían implementar y cómo podrían las agencias mejorar esta cooperación y coordinación junto con los pueblos indígenas y los estados. Gracias, Mirna.
Muchas gracias, Lola. Naxa, al Sutralam Kulatara Maikisna, saludo a cada uno de ustedes desde mi pueblo, el pueblo Misquito de Nicaragua. Cuando pienso en la coalición, recuerdo que en la fase preparatoria de la cumbre de sistemas alimentarios, coincidió con la recuperación de más de 100 comunidades en la zona donde yo vivo, que habían sido afectados por 2 huracanes que destruyeron totalmente las comunidades, más de 100 comunidades. Y entonces la participación mía en la discusión de esa cumbre no era porque creía que era importante los sistemas alimentarios de los pueblos indígenas. Se daba con esas comunidades teniendo que recuperarse de la destrucción del huracán, de las inundaciones y asegurar comida a corto plazo para seguir sobreviviendo. Por nuestro nivel organizativo no murió ni una persona en el huracán, pero los impactos de las inundaciones y de la destrucción de todas las cosechas son problemas que nuestras comunidades enfrentan todos los tiempos, ahora con el cambio climático. Entonces, nuestras recomendaciones en la cumbre fueron muy concretas y las ha señalado nuestro amigo el señor embajador. Tenemos sistemas alimentarios resilientes, basados en los conocimientos de nuestros pueblos, basados en los sistemas productivos ancestrales combinados con nuevas técnicas. Pero esto funciona porque tenemos nuestros modelos organizativos propios. Y lo que buscamos con esta coalición es la articulación entre esos sistemas propios con la voluntad política y los recursos de los gobiernos, de los estados, y obviamente con la asistencia técnica y los recursos de las agencias de cooperación internacional. Eso es lo que buscamos con la coalición. Contar con una plataforma que permita que estas 3 instancias puedan sentarse y puedan aprender lecciones en conjunto, las puedan transformar en políticas, las puedan transformar en recursos y nuestras comunidades puedan comer y puedan mantener esos sistemas sostenibles de alimentación. Para eso creamos la coalición. Y entonces hoy que venimos a decirle a FAO, a FIDA, al Programa Mundial de Alimentos, ¿qué pueden hacer para que ese derecho nuestro se cumpla? Pues lo primero es que no puede haber nada sobre nosotros sin nosotros. O sea, si los pueblos indígenas no participamos, no nos apropiamos. Y lo que inventen va a fracasar si no nos incorporan de una forma efectiva a mujeres, a hombres, a jóvenes, a personas con discapacidad. Entonces, ese mecanismo de selección de nuestros representantes ante esa coalición debe de ser sumamente participativo. La relación entre esos representantes nuestros en esa coalición con nuestras comunidades y nuestras organizaciones debe ser sistemático, debe de funcionar. Y no podemos darnos el lujo como agencias de Naciones Unidas de jugar con las organizaciones de los pueblos indígenas. No nos dividan. respeten a nuestras organizaciones. Eso es lo primero que venimos a decirles. Lo segundo, hemos luchado fuertemente para que existan espacios de participación. Este foro de pueblos indígenas en FIDA, llevamos casi 20 años haciéndolo. No vengamos a inventar nuevas formas de diálogo o nuevos espacios de diálogo. Utilicen las lecciones aprendidas. La elaboración del libro Huipala con FAO fue un proceso participativo. Entonces, escuchen. Lo segundo que le venimos a decir a la agencia, escúchennos y hágannos caso. Trabajemos en conjunto. Lo tercero que le venimos a decir es que no estamos hablando de un tema nuevo. Nuestros pueblos tienen múltiples experiencias en donde están demostrando que sus sistemas alimentarios son resilientes. Juntemos, crezcamos, conozcamos esas experiencias, conozcámoslas, escuchémoslas. Escuchemos, por ejemplo, nosotros creamos junto con el Consejo Internacional de Tratados Indios con CITI, creamos ya un mecanismo en la región que nos reunimos casi cada mes para darle seguimiento a la coalición y darle seguimiento a otras recomendaciones que salieron de las cumbres. ¿Cómo construimos sinergias con esos mecanismos que ya existen? Cuarta cosa que venimos a decirle a las agencias de Naciones Unidas en Roma, que trabajen juntos. Que trabajen juntos. Obviamente estamos totalmente de acuerdo con las recomendaciones del señor embajador. Recursos, alineamiento a la coalición, darle recursos a la coalición, pero trabajando de forma articulada. Si algunos apoyan a Slow Food, ¿cómo puede Slow Food contribuir a la coalición? Si otros apoyan otras iniciativas, ¿cómo pueden? Las lecciones que hemos aprendido con IPAF, financiando pequeños proyectos de FIDA que tienen que ver con sistemas alimentarios, cómo eso puede enriquecer a la coalición. Entonces, trabajar en conjunto no es crear nuevos instrumentos, sino utilizar experiencia e instrumentos que ustedes mismos ya han desarrollado. Entonces, me parece que ese es nombrar puntos focales, cada una de las tres agencias. ¿Quiénes son sus puntos focales para coalición? ¿Y cuáles son esos mecanismos de articulación de esos puntos focales con nosotros, con los pueblos indígenas? Yo creo que si hacen esas cosas, más las recomendaciones del señor embajador, por supuesto que va a haber una coalición para mucho tiempo. Entonces, creo que la verdad es que nosotros necesitamos que eso que ustedes puedan articular a nivel de Roma inspire a nuestros gobiernos, inspire a nuestros países, para que eso se pueda reproducir en los países. Porque donde están las comunidades, donde están los problemas, es en los países. Si aquí se hablan y trabajan juntos, van a transmitir eso a los países. Y eso es lo que nos va a permitir realmente aplicar las políticas de forma coherente y asegurar mejor uso de los recursos que llegan desde cada uno. La experiencia de diálogo que hemos tenido a partir de este esfuerzo es lo que necesitamos que se continúe replicando a través de la coalición y se traslade a cada uno de nuestros países para que ahí efectivamente podamos ver los cambios. Muchas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, Mirna. Yo creo que no hay demasiado que decir. La claridad es una claridad contundente en tu presentación, pero la necesidad de trabajar de forma articulada, la necesidad de aprender de las lecciones anteriores, de los procesos que ya existen, de los procesos propios de los pueblos indígenas. Y y para que esta articulación tenga una incidencia real. Entonces, partido de la realidad para llegar a lo formal y cómo volvemos a la realidad y cómo tiene un impacto real en la realidad de los pueblos indígenas. Y que esto solo se consigue si se aplica de una forma coherente y articulada, donde estén los pueblos indígenas, sean el motor principal. Muchísimas gracias, Mirna. Para terminar esta parte del debate, le quiero dar la palabra a Frank Roy. Frank, es un placer y un honor volver a estar contigo en un panel. Frank is the coordinator of the Indigenous Partnership for Agrobiodiversity and Food Sovereignty. Frank belongs to the Khasi Indigenous Peoples Community of Northeast India. Frank, the floor is yours to share with us your ideas about the way forward for the coalition.
Madam Moderator, Lola, Your Excellency, the Ambassador of Mexico, my friend, Mirna, our long-term colleague, partner in the work on indigenous issues, Dario, the chair of the UN Permanent Forum, and my friends in the UN systems, and brothers and sisters. His Excellency, the Ambassador of Mexico to Italy and the Rome-based agencies said that indigenous peoples can lead us to the future that we want through our indigenous peoples' food systems, and that is the focus of the coalition that has been formed. And we wholeheartedly agree with him. We can be effective game changers towards a more nature-based food system because we have a sacred and reverent relationship with nature. Our guiding values of caring and sharing and of reciprocity helps us to adapt to our distinctive and diverse environmental systems without much conflict. Indigenous peoples' food systems therefore offer risk management initiatives at different scales to limit global warming, to prevent future famines, and to restore biodiversity loss. For example, Tadesse, one of your board members, in his beautiful presentation last Thursday, pointed out that the diversity of his local food system nurture pollinators and natural pest control organisms and thereby build resistance. Our predominantly rain-fed systems do not inundate fields and produce no methane emission as in conventional agriculture. The regeneration of our forests and fallow lands as part of our managed practices have made our local food systems as inherent carbon sinks and low emitters of greenhouse houses. But despite all this, and despite all the efforts we made in 2021, indigenous peoples were marginal players in the UN Food System Summit. But for the 7 countries that came forward to take up our baton and to carry and promote the coalition of the indigenous people, coalition on indigenous people's food system. Thank you, Your Excellency, for the work that you've done together with the indigenous peoples. However, if the coalition is to be effective in the near future, then defending the rights of indigenous peoples to their lands and territories must be its highest priority. And indigenous people organizations such as IPAF and others must work with the coalition to closely monitor the work of the Rome-based agencies from this respect. I think this is critically important as we seek for solutions to climate change that may be at the expense of indigenous communities. The historic demonizing of indigenous food systems especially of shifting or rotational agriculture in Asia, and considered as a primitive and destructive practice, was initiated by FAO experts in 1950 and 60s. Many governments still follow this nasty narrative, and thousands of indigenous peoples are still being hunted and haunted by the overzealous government bureaucrats and bureaucracies. The coalition must have the courage to take up this matter with the Director General of FAO and ask FAO either to apologize or make a policy statement to overturn this wrong advice and align our actions then to the strategies of the coalition. But such a change of narrative by FAO is very much needed. The indigenous organization that I lead is organizing in 2024 a conclave, and we are willing to offer a platform for FAO to do so. Listening to the IPAF regional presentations in the last few days, it is clear to me that several IPAF grants are showing signs of being game changers. But with the arrival of a disastrous and all-pervasive climate breakdown, the name of the game must shift from pilot projects to scaling up of successful initiatives of indigenous peoples. How many IFAD loans have scale-up IFAD grants? I hope before you leave this hall, you will take a review of that and see, have you done anything of that sort? And if not done, why not? And what should be done? I believe that the coalition should work to be a platform to work closely with IPAF and others to monitor this development within IFAD. Otherwise, all this becomes a child's play and a little game and ritual we want. Similarly, World Food Programme's successful school meal programs needs to be monitored by this coalition from an indigenous perspective. We can build bridges to a new and interconnected web of thoughts and actions. But as indigenous people, we need trust. We need support to scale our best practices. We need to develop a dedicated team of young indigenous youth for local and global leadership. TIP is organizing, the organization I lead, a global conclave in 2024 in Northeast India, where IPAF, the coalition, and others, and all of you will be invited to participate, to demonstrate, to connect the disconnected, to celebrate, to call for effective policies, and to scale up indigenous people's initiatives for the 2030 outcomes. Thank you very much for inviting me to this forum.
Thank you very much, Frank. It's always very inspiring to listen to you, and particularly with some very concrete recommendations that you have, like that the coalition should be a platform to monitor development and of the work of the UN agencies, of course IFAD, but all UN agencies. And monitor is also an issue of bringing how they do comply with their policies and their commitments, and the need that indigenous peoples and the need of support for indigenous peoples to scale up their own best practices, and without forgetting the role of the youth. Thank you very much, Frank. So now we go to the last round of panelists, which are the Rome-based organizations. So perhaps, I would very much like you to reflect on what you have heard from the previous panelists with regard to the role and the possibilities for the UN agencies and how you will work in the context or within the framework of the coalition. So I would like to welcome Ilaria Firmian, who is the Senior Technical Specialist on Indigenous Peoples at IFAD. Ilaria, please.
Thank you very much. And I will be short because this session is really meant to receive guidance from Indigenous peoples, all delegates and member states on Rome-based agencies collaboration. And I think we are already receiving a lot of very useful inputs in that sense. Maybe just quickly to respond, now we heard about the importance of aligning our strategies and policies and lines of work to the coalition. And I would like to say on IFAD side, in a sense, we have been lucky because we have just gone through the process of updating our policy of engagement with Indigenous peoples. And the coalition is already integrated in the process, in the policy. It's mentioned, there's a lot of reference to it. And what is also very important is that the policy has a new principle of engagement related to food sovereignty, food security, and nutrition, which links very well to the work of the coalition. And I think that this alignment is not by chance, is because the process of the policy have been fully co-led by the steering committee of the Indigenous Peoples Forum at IFAD. So this is where all the knowledge and the needs of Indigenous peoples have been expressed. And the process of the Indigenous Peoples Forum at IFAD is per se, I think, another way of aligning IFAD lines of work to the coalition, because it is a consultative process and it's not just one moment in time. So I think this is, in terms of alignment, is very important because it provides guidance to IFAD in terms of strategies, lines of work, and so on. Another very important contribution, I think, related to building a successful portfolio of projects on this issue. And IFAD has, for example, from a result from a recent stock take on project on agroecology, we have like 60% of the projects that completed between 2018 and 2023. They have a strong focus on agroecology, and the stock take identifies a very clear connection of those projects that are strong on agroecology and the project that target Indigenous peoples and have them among the target groups. So this is really an area, there's a lot of knowledge embedded in those projects that can be extracted and used to develop, to basically to provide evidence, to disseminate and scale up the Indigenous peoples' food systems. The other part, which is very important, talking within the portfolio, is the Indigenous Peoples Assistance Facility, where also many of these small grant projects have a specific focus on building resilient food systems. And really, there is a lot to learn from this portfolio, both in terms of evidence generation, but also of dissemination and capacity building, including the creation of tools for capacity building. One relevant tool that is always referred to when we talk about the engagement of IFAD in the coalition is the toolbox on a sustainable and resilient food system, Indigenous people's food system. And then all this evidence and learning is really the one that should be used for a policy level dialogue. And this is where I think I can come more to the Rome-based agencies and on how we can better collaborate. I think that the very existence of the coalition has brought us to more regular consultations. And I think the immediate result we had from those more regular consultations we have is that we identify actions at country level where the three agencies together can contribute. With reference to what has been discussed in the past 2 days of this forum, especially during the regional discussions, there was a strong suggestion to consider a Rome-based agency partnership approach in the regional action plans, given that we need really to explore more and more complementarities, especially at the field level. So since we will be working as a result also of this forum in institutionalizing a mechanism of consultations and engagement at country level, I think that this will be a good space where we can strengthen our collaboration. In addition, probably another couple of areas that are relevant where I think we can easily join forces are those related to capacity building, for all, I mean, for staff and partners, both in HQ and in the field on indigenous people's food system, and I think on indigenous people's issues overall. And we were even initiating a discussion on an RBA approach to indigenous internship or a fellowship program, which is still part of capacity building, but also really a way to also have more participation of indigenous youth in the Rome-based agency systems. So I think these are just few ideas thrown on the table, and I like to my colleagues to complement. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ilaria, for sharing somehow IFAD experiences and how you have incorporated already the coalition in a lot of the work that is done. But I also see or hearing you referring to many of the best practices that also Mirna was referring to, on how to build up and scale up and coordinate and build together further on those issues. You mentioned more regular consultations and the need for actions at country level. So, and of course, the partnership approach. I think there are a lot of experience now that this is really the key, the basics. I mean, without that, nothing will be built. And the capacity building aspect, not only in the side of indigenous peoples, but the capacity building in the other side, in the staff, within the staff of the UN agencies, within the people working in governmental institutions also. So thank you very much, Ilaria. And I will go to the next speaker and welcome very much Alejandra Pero. Alejandra, it's a pleasure again to meet you here. And Alejandra is the Global Advisor on Indigenous Peoples from the World Food Programme. Alejandra, please.
Oh, thanks, Jan. You see a bit of Rome-based collaboration already. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here. And for WFP, it's a great opportunity. And we definitely see the Indigenous Peoples Food Systems Coalition as a real mechanism for collaboration now and in the future. And WFP is a committed member to this coalition and has been accompanying and supporting this process since its inception. So a real pleasure for the invitation to be here. I also just wanted to show also this Rome-based agency brochure that we have developed over the last few weeks, which is available online. And I think many of the initiatives are also in there, which I'm sure will be useful to many of you and all of us. And this is also a first attempt to start consolidating our work in one place, and knowing that the intention to collaborate is very much on our minds, and looking at ways as how to make that a reality. In terms of the support or how we've been working with the coalition and bringing it forward from WFP's side, and here I want to thank Frank for mentioning the school meals work, which is a pivotal program within WFP's work. And that's where we've been linking with one of the pillars of work of the coalition, which is on nutrition and enabling healthy diets. And one of the things that we've been working on over the last few months is really, or over the last year now, has really been about making those interlinkages between members of the coalition, other Indigenous peoples organizations, and ensuring that they can participate, that they're aware of this School Meals Coalition, and including them to ensure that Indigenous peoples' perspectives on food systems are actually embedded and can be participating in the school meals work as well. So that's been a big impetus. And secondly, is now a regional report that will be coming out from the Latin American region, where we'll also be looking at intercultural approaches to school meals. And here we're really looking at working with members of the coalition as co-authors and to participate in that report as well. So those are sort of concrete examples of how we've been moving forward on substantively on the coalition. Thirdly, I just wanted to mention that we do face challenges, and those challenges are really about giving visibility to this coalition, raising awareness around the coalition. Maybe at the global level, there's more awareness of it, but we do notice that nationally and regionally, we need to raise awareness. We need to make sure our partners are aware of this coalition, what plans are involved in this coalition, and how we really want to expand it and bring more organizations and other member states and other agencies to work together on this, given this opportunity. And the fact that it is also time bound as well. We know that there's going to be a stock taking place globally this coming July. So this is an opportunity as well. How are we going to focus in terms of moving now more intentionally and forcefully and ensuring that we can work on getting some of these actions, as our other colleagues have said just now, you know, in terms of partnerships and engagement. So moving forward, how are we going to collaborate? How are we going to work more closely together? And I think here we really need to see how we're going to work together regionally, how we're going to work together nationally. And here, just last month, there was a working group among UN agencies in Latin America looking at the Food Systems Summit and what is happening and how it's going to move forward. And there were discussions, of course, on how to ensure Indigenous peoples participate, how these national pathways will be working with Indigenous peoples. And I think there it's really important for Indigenous peoples networks to be engaged, to be participating nationally and regionally. And that's why a meeting like this right now together, all of us here, is a way for those messages to also be taken forward nationally and regionally. And then I think among us, the agencies, we need to harness each other's work. So we build on, for example, existing work that IFAD has done on nutrient-rich and neglected foods. How do we harness that? How can we work with IFAD to continue that work and then apply it to, for example, school meals or other areas that WFP is working on as well? How do we work with the local networks and the partners that FAO and IFAD have established as well? How can we strengthen those coalitions, those consortiums of organizations? And then how do we participate as well in existing hubs, such as the Global Hub on Indigenous Peoples' Food Systems? So I think all these ways are the mechanisms that exist, and how can we support each other's work moving forward, but concretely, regionally and nationally. And I'll stop there for now. Thanks very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Alejandra. I think the whole issue of raising visibility for the coalition, but not only at the international level, which will be perhaps the easiest, but at national and regional level. And also for coming with very concrete ideas on how to move forward and how to build also with what other UN agencies and have done, like IFAD, but also FAO with the hub. And so thank you very much, Alejandra. And now, not least, I have John Fernandez Larinoa. I need to read your title, which is the head of the Indigenous Peoples Unit at FAO. And it's an enormous pleasure, John, to have you here. And of course, you have been directly involved in the whole process of the coalition and the establishment of the coalition. So please, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Lola. And again, thank you to everyone. It's hard to speak last, and I think most of the messages have been sent. But I want to thank particularly IFAD for organizing this Rome-based agencies event. I think it's extremely important. So I want to personally thank Ilaria for this. But I also want to acknowledge the work of the previous colleagues that worked before Ilaria, Alejandra Cordone, Mattia Praia-Galetti, even Fran, who in a way were visionaries when this Indigenous Peoples Forum started in IFAD several years ago. I think we have gone a long way, and we really thank IFAD for organizing this event. It's been extremely important for us that we were not invited as an observer this year. Ilaria, thank you so much for that. I think among sisters agencies, very important to listen to each other, to work together, to forge alliances. Now, everything has been said about the coalition, and many of you have been involved in the discussions on the coalition and in the regional consultations. I also want to acknowledge the regions that are not here in the room. We've been working as well with the Arctic. We've been working with Central Europe. They are not here, but they've been fully participating in the messages. The first take-home message, and I think Mirna, but also Frank and the Ambassador Miguel from Mexico have put forward, is that everybody is welcome in the coalition, not only countries. There is interest from more countries, but there's interest from all of you. And if there's interest from all of you, there's a space in the coalition. We are forging together the work plan, and no work plan is good if there's no participation. But not participation only to the talking, which is fundamental, but to the working, that is even more important. And I think everybody has signaled that the action and where the problems are the national level. And this is at the very essence and at the heart of the coalition. There are many spaces in the UN, but there's no many coalitions on indigenous peoples. Actually, it's the only one. Following the UN Food System Summit, there were 22 coalitions, but there's only one on indigenous peoples. Now, the coalitions by definition is a collective space where member countries, in this case, indigenous peoples, UN agencies, academia, researchers, can work together. And the idea is collectively working together. I don't know how many other UN spaces are like this in the world. But certainly we are extremely lucky to have 7 countries plus new countries that are willing to work with indigenous peoples and that are willing to work on public policies. I think the challenge is how do we transform the discussions into public policies at the country level that can improve the lives of indigenous girls, indigenous women, indigenous youth, indigenous disabled people, and indigenous elders. We are already doing it. We've been working with some of you. I recognize Honorable Vital Bambase. We've been discussing with him and several other indigenous sisters and brothers to organize a high-level expert seminar in Africa, in the Africa region, with different countries, different members, and the technical committee of indigenous colleagues are pushing forward the way in which the coalition is going to be discussing in Nairobi in June this year. And this is work that is being led by indigenous peoples and that is already attracting the interest of other countries. And the first thing that we did is that we agree was that we are going to have the 3 Rome-based agencies working together, but not only, also UNESCO is interested, also UNEP is interested, and we shouldn't keep the doors closed because of the physical location. Something we learned during the pandemic is, and I think Dario talked about it, is that time is relative, but the space is also relative. We need to break these bridges and work together. The collaboration, and I know I'm aware of the time, so the collaboration should be certainly expanding each other's comparative advantage. And when I say each other's, I don't refer only to the ROM-based agencies, but I also talked about the countries. The countries have the key to policy making. They have the key of the normative spaces that are being discussed in FAO. And many of the countries that are in this room they have the same representatives that go to the WFP board, that they go to they will be tomorrow at the IFAD Council. And I think it's extremely important to start identifying what are those opportunities for policy making that can benefit from the operational capacity of WFP, the financial knowledge that IFAD has, the technical know-how that FAO has. How can we each come together with the little we know and make better processes and better policies? And the target has to be at the national process. So there's 3 spaces of incidence for indigenous peoples in the UN Food System Summit. One of them is what is called SENA, and you have already identified 3 representatives that will be participating in the SENA. The other one is the experts, indigenous experts that are following other coalitions. We know that there's indigenous experts working in the agroecology coalition, some of them in the seed systems coalition. And of course, this coalition on indigenous peoples that is open to all of you that are willing to collaborate and work in the work plan. We need to identify funding. That is a challenge. But already, for example, the CFS, the World Committee on Food Security, is interested in having some recommendations, why not, from the Coalition on Indigenous Peoples. In the history of the World Committee on Food Security, there has not been recommendations on indigenous peoples to be discussed in the work plan, and they are now reaching out to see if they could have some. So an opportunity of collaboration for all of us, each of us from our roles, our capacity, but certainly open to all of you. And again, I want to thank for all the support during the consultations and to IFAD for the space for this ROM-based agency event. Thank you so much, and back to you, Lola.
Thank you very much, John, for being short and very concrete and about the understanding of the collaboration as expanding each other comparative advantages. I think is very important as a base, as a point of departure, and also for sharing the opportunity of the spaces, those spaces that you see, like the SENA, the indigenous experts involved in other coalitions, including this coalition, the World Committee on Food Systems, is open a lot of opportunities for the coalition to really have an impact and really provide spaces and real spaces for indigenous peoples to engage with and to have an impact too. So thank you very much. So I think we are finishing, but I don't want to close the event without giving the floor to His Excellency the Ambassador of Mexico and Dario for some very, very short remarks, concluding remarks. Okay. Okay, so, sorry, but somehow I've been pushed to close at 3:30, and we are at 3:30. But so I will take this opportunity to ask the representative of states that are joining us today here if they have any comment about the presentations that we have heard here today, or about their views, expectations, and way forward of the coalition. Of course, you are a very, very important component, as all of the panelists has said, is a platform for dialogue, and of course, states plays a key role in that dialogue. So please, if any of you want to take the floor, please do not hesitate to do that. Please, Canada.
Sure. Thank you so much, and thank you so much to all the representatives who spoke for this this panel. And I think the fact that we're at 3:30 and there's still much more to talk about is an indication of how important this is as a topic and a way to bring us together. And I think that's ultimately what it comes down to, is that this coalition represents an opportunity for collaboration. And I think, as many of the panelists spoke to, at multiple levels, global, regional, national, across entities, UN agencies, members, Indigenous peoples, communities. And I think that that's really fundamentally what we need to think of going forward. I think there's been very concrete examples put forward today, which I very much appreciate, for us as member states to be able to hear what those opportunities are, both from Indigenous peoples as well as from the UN partners. So I think that helps drive us forward. Coming to action is fundamentally what we need to get to, and to do that we need to have very concrete ideas, because there is no shortage of work to be done in this space. But we need to come to ground on something clear, achievable, and measurable. And I think that today we've gotten some ideas of that, and that gives us a positive spirit to move forward and continue the dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. And I'm sorry that we have so little time that we could not prolong the discussion with an open dialogue. I think the coalition merit that, but that is, of course, is a limitation of time within the framework of the forum. There are a lot of other things to finish and to work with. So I just want to ask Darío or the Ambassador of Mexico if very shortly could provide some concluding remarks.
Muchas gracias, Lola, por la conducción, y a todos nuestros compañeros disculpas ofrecemos desde la mesa porque realmente no tuvimos la oportunidad de tener un diálogo más interactivo. Sin embargo, este es apenas un primer escenario. Yo quisiera simplemente decir que esta es una oportunidad para que entre todos aumentemos la coherencia de lo que discutimos en unos escenarios, podamos reflejarlos en otros. Y para aumentar la coherencia entre las agencias, entre los gobiernos y también incluso entre las mismas organizaciones indígenas y delegados en los distintos escenarios, necesitamos articularnos cada vez más, dialogar, dialogar y dialogar, pero sobre todo también actuar, actuar y actuar en el terreno. Y finalmente decir que este es un escenario que se caracteriza por la apertura. Y en esa apertura todos y cada una estamos bienvenidos. Y bueno, nos queda mucho trabajo por delante. Y muchas gracias, señor embajador, y a todos nuestros colegas de la mesa por tan importantes aportes.
Gracias, Darío. Señor embajador.
Muchas gracias. Voy a hablar en español para que vean que sí sé hablar en español. Agradezco mucho a todos ustedes, en particular a los países que han estado atrás de nosotros y nos han estado apoyando. Mirna, voy a terminar con una frase tuya, que si me lo permites, mis compañeros que nos juntamos en otras reuniones en los órganos de la ONU, me van a oírla decir, pero me parece que es la frase final con la que nos deberíamos ir los que estamos aquí. Mirna dijo en su discurso que lo que se haga en Roma inspire a los países, que lo que se haga en Roma sea la luz para que nosotros transformemos lo que tenemos que hacer en los países. Me parece que ese es el mensaje, y te voy a robar la frase si me lo permites, porque creo que es central. Whatever we do in Rome, we need to inspire the countries to change. Rome needs to be the light in these areas for the transformation. Thank you so much to everyone. And we'll see you in about 15 minutes for the closing ceremony, I guess. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much to all. And I think with these final remarks, we close the panel discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Actually, it's a very short coffee break, like 5-6 minutes before the final session, please.
All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the final plenary session of the 6th Global Meeting of the Indigenous Peoples Forum at IFAD. And this session is also open to IFAD governors and executive board representatives. Welcome everyone, and it's my great pleasure to chair this session. My name is Satu Santala. I'm the Associate Vice President for External Affairs and Governance for IFAD. I hope sincerely that over the past days you've had had meaningful conversations and you've really been able to exchange ideas and experiences and build new relationships. And I can feel that in the room and out there in the coffee area that indeed this has been happening. So for this final session, we will have the reading of the synthesis of the deliberations. And then a response from my colleague, Donald Brown, who's the Associate Vice President of the Program Management Department here at IFAD. And then this session really gives us an opportunity to together reflect on the progress we've made and the challenges that lie ahead and what more actions we can take to co-create a better future for our planet and for all of us. But without further ado, let me give the floor to Mr. Walde Taddese for reading the synthesis of the deliberations.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The 6th Global Meeting was held in Rome on 9, 10, and 13 February 2023. The meeting was the culmination of a wide global process of deliberation through regional and sub-regional consultation meetings in Africa, Asia and the Pacific, and Latin America and the Caribbean. The extensive dialogue around the theme of the forum generated key recommendations summarized herein. We indigenous people are among those who are particularly affected by the impacts of climate change. These lead to disruptions to agriculture and other livelihood activities and ecosystems, increased threats to the integrity and security of indigenous lands, territories, and resources, and exacerbate food insecurity. These effects further result in adoption of unsustainable livelihood strategies, including migration, increased tension and conflict, and an increased burden on women, children, youth, persons with disabilities, and the elderly. Likewise, we are concerned about some undesirable and unjust climate actions in large renewable energy projects involving energy transitional minerals through mining are being imposed on our territories without our consent and in violation of our rights. Indigenous climate leadership faces challenges, including lack of recognition and understanding of and respect for our governance and decision-making institutions, as well as our rights, in particular, free, prior, and informed consent. Discriminatory laws and practices, forced displacement and encroachment onto indigenous lands and territories, failure to make space for indigenous planning and exclusion from climate change debates, decision-making, and financing. Despite the daunting challenges that we have, we continue to demonstrate resilience and active leadership in different ways, processes, and at all levels. Indigenous peoples, community-led adaptation actions are based on traditional technologies, knowledge, and capacities, and the incorporation of innovations. These include adjusting agricultural calendars, adopting more resilient varieties and seeds and livestock, diversifying agriculture and livelihood strategies, and conserving water and soil. Additional actions include mitigation measures such as reforestation, land use and territorial planning, life plans anchored in our visions and well-being, sustainable agriculture practices, defense of our lands against encroachments, and community-managed renewable energy plans. We reinforce these actions by strengthening traditional organizational systems and institutions, by building partnership and solidarity with national and international organizations and other communities, and by conducting advocacy. I'm on the 8th point now. Indigenous peoples' climate leadership is anchored in our ways of knowing and being, characterized by a deep, intimate, and reciprocal relationship with land, our community living, our resilient and creative spirit, and our intercultural and long-term outlook. Our climate leadership is also intimately tied to the integrity, security, and health of our lands and territories and custodianship, robust indigenous social institutions that sustain communities, the vitality of our knowledge systems and spiritual dimensions, and a supportive social, economic, and political ecology. Number 9, indigenous climate actions highlights the importance role of women as knowledge bearers and transmitters, as anchors and guardians of community life and well-being. Equally, the indigenous experience points in the important role of young people as leaders. Number 10, IFAD has been an important partner to indigenous peoples, demonstrating tangible efforts to make space for our participation and incorporating and responding to our perspectives in its plans and policies. Number 11, based on the frank and open deliberations we have had over the last few months during the consultation processes, and at this global meeting, we recommend the following recommendations to IFAD policy on engagement with indigenous peoples. Number 1, allocate adequate financial and human resources to fully implement the updated IFAD policy on engagement with indigenous peoples. This includes the recruitment of dedicated staff at all levels, including a lead technical specialist, the translation of publications of the policy in indigenous languages, awareness raising, and capacity building of indigenous peoples, governments, and IFAD staff, and the development of monitoring tools. Develop guidelines and protocol for the meaningful participation of the members of the steering committee of the Indigenous Peoples Forum at IFAD as observers at Executive Board of IFAD, at the Executive Board of IFAD. The Indigenous Peoples Fund and our forum process and dialogue. Number 3, enhance communication, dialogue, and information sharing with indigenous people, including the participants in the Indigenous Peoples Forum, especially at the regional and national levels. This includes the organization of quarterly meetings, the establishment of country coordination groups, and the identification of focal points at the level of both IFAD country teams and indigenous peoples organizations. Number 4, ensure that recommendations from the forum are integrated in the regional action plans to be agreed upon with IFAD's regional advisor divisions. IFAD country programs. Number 5, ensure the meaningful and independent participation of indigenous peoples in the design, implementation, and monitoring and evaluation of IFAD strategy projects and programs at all levels in order to, 1, align them to our needs, priorities, and aspirations, noting gender, intergenerational specificities, disabilities, and number 2, integrate our values and tenure governance and knowledge systems, taking into account our territorial planning and visioning cycles. And number 3, ensure the interventions do not disrupt our system, but rather strengthen and build on them. Number 6, provide the necessary information resources and capacity building to enable indigenous peoples to effectively engage in the design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of strategies, projects, and programs, and ensure the involvement and hiring of indigenous consultants in these processes. Number 7, IFAD country teams to actively engage and collaborate with other UN agencies to strengthen complementarity and enhance synergies in supporting the implementation of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, UNDRIP, and an updated IFAD policy of engagement with indigenous peoples. Indigenous peoples climate leadership. Number 8, enhance IFAD's leadership role in the engagement with indigenous peoples. To promote the respect for and protection of indigenous peoples' rights and well-being by governments, including through free, prior, and informed consent, especially in countries where no protocols exist, and provide effective grievance mechanisms. B, foster meaningful dialogue and cooperation between indigenous people, organizations, and traditional institutions and governments, and ensure that the latter are aware of the updated IFAD policy on engagement with indigenous peoples and of IFAD intervention on the ground. C, mobilize support, including direct finance by other international agencies for indigenous peoples' climate leadership. D, facilitate and support the meaningful participation of indigenous peoples in climate and biodiversity actions at all levels. Number 9, invest in building the capacities of indigenous people, including to access climate finances that is culturally appropriate, including in relation to disaster risk and response mechanisms, and to design and manage projects and programs. As concrete measures, number 1, develop an internship and fellowship program for indigenous leaders and professionals at IFAD, prioritizing women and youth, and 2, facilitate learning exchanges among parties of indigenous peoples assistance facility in relation to climate leadership. Number 10, increase direct support to the initiative of indigenous peoples with a focus on women, girls, persons with disabilities, and youth in climate leadership and resilience, including through the IPAF. Recommendations to governments: develop legislation, policies, and programs that protect and advance the rights of indigenous people and ensure their effective implementation in coordination with our people, communities, and organizations by ensuring our free, prior, and informed consent. Number 8, indigenous people climate leadership is anchored in our ways. And informed. This is the last page. Consent, alignment of the UNDRIP, and the implementation of updated IFAD policy on engagement with indigenous peoples. Recognize and protect land rights and the integrity of indigenous territories of life, and support the development and implementation of self-determined development with the necessary technical, financial, and institutional resources. Number 2, support indigenous people's climate leadership through programs, policies, adequate resources, and financing mechanisms that support our self-determined development with special attention to women, youth, and persons with disabilities. Number 3, ensure the full and effective participation of indigenous peoples, including women, youth, and persons with disabilities in discussions, decision-making, and planning processes, including those related to climate and conservation action at all levels. Commitments as indigenous people. As indigenous people, we commit to, number 1, continue to protect and enhance the health and integrity of our lands, territories, and resources through sustainable natural resource management practices. Number 2, revitalize and continue to develop, transmit indigenous peoples' values, knowledge, and practices, including our forms of governance and decision-making as key institutions in the stewardship of our lands, territories, and resources, and in our climate leadership. Number 3, continue to advocate for indigenous peoples' rights and well-being and meaningful, diverse participation in IFAD's decision-making processes related to climate change and biodiversity conservation at all levels. Continue to build, number 4, collaboration and solidarity between indigenous peoples in support of our climate leadership, including through the documentation and sharing of knowledge and experience. Build, number 5, build the capacities of indigenous women and youth and strengthen their participation in decision-making processes, and organizations recognizing the immense value of their contribution to climate leadership. Number 6, strengthen the engagement and improve communication with IFAD at all levels, including by translating the IFAD policy on engagement with indigenous peoples in indigenous languages and accessible formats. Number 7, support the 13th replenishment of IFAD. We, as the indigenous people delegates to this 6th forum, express our sincere gratitude and appreciation to IFAD management and the staff for organizing this important meeting in strengthening and partnership between IFAD and the indigenous people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tadise, for sharing that synthesis of deliberations of the forum. It clearly shows what a rich meeting you have had, and it once more shows indigenous peoples' climate leadership. Very, very happy to have heard this. So now I will give the floor to Associate Vice President Donald Brown, who will provide IFAD management's response to this. Thank you. Go ahead, Donald.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everybody. Good afternoon to the chair, members of the steering committee of the Indigenous Peoples Forum at IFAD, to all the representatives of Indigenous peoples organizations and communities here today. Friends and colleagues, I'll be giving management's reaction, but clearly we've just seen the recommendations, so it's just an initial response. And I'm very pleased to have the privilege today to deliver IFAD's initial management response to the synthesis of deliberations from the 6th global meeting of the Indigenous Peoples Forum at IFAD. And I would like to open by reiterating that the forum continues to be a real testimony to the determination and commitment of the representatives of indigenous peoples who are, over the years, have contributed so actively to make it what it is today, but as well to the dedication of the IFAD staff that have supported its creation and managed its regular meetings. This is the 3rd Indigenous Peoples Forum that I have personally attended, and I see it as being ever more inclusive and consultative. And I'm very pleased to see that each time I've come, the deliberations become more and more focused. And as I was listening to as I came in at the beginning, very actionable. I believe this year there were 150 Indigenous peoples representatives in the 13 consultations. And there was also a significant number of IFAD staff, regional directors, country program officers, and other IFAD staff who participated, not only in the regional consultations, but on day 2 of the forum. This forum is an event of real value to IFAD, and I hope it also is to you. We share experience, we learn from each other, we find ways to partner more closely and to have clearer objectives. My only regret is not having had time to sit through many more of the sessions of the forum I would have liked to. But as when I connected with some of you last week, I was in Latin America actually spending time with indigenous people and traditional communities, because for me, nothing is better than seeing the work on the ground. As you may have heard from President Lario in his opening remarks, IFAD is committed to prioritizing our work with indigenous peoples. You are the anchors of climate leadership with your intimate knowledge of your land and your reciprocal relationship with the biodiversity of your land. As President Lario put it, no one will ever understand nature as deeply as indigenous peoples, but it is also so much more than this. And so in the context of the severe climate crisis that we're faced with today, it is only apt to have the 6th Indigenous Peoples Forum at IFAD dedicated to Indigenous peoples climate leadership. And in this context, I wish to acknowledge the recently updated IFAD policy of engagement with Indigenous peoples, which the Indigenous Peoples Forum has endorsed, and with the new renewed focus on food sovereignty, food security, and nutrition. So moving to the synthesis of the deliberations, firstly, I'd like to thank you for having put it together so quickly in the synthesis document. It is a very helpful accountability tool for us all, and it is very concise and easy to read. So it is through the Programme Management Department of IFAD, which I head, that much of our partnership with Indigenous peoples get operationalized at country level. So I would just like to highlight the point that in many countries, Indigenous peoples are key stakeholders and active partners in our country programs, and that their communities are particularly marginalized and so must be important beneficiaries of our projects that we co-finance and are delivered through governments. I've heard the recommendations you put to IFAD, and as you can imagine, I and IFAD's management are still internalizing these. But on first read, they all appear very sensible, and I believe that IFAD should aim to respond positively to the majority of them, but within the structures and resources that are available to IFAD. Central to success will be to make space for your voices, not only in our projects, which actually are government projects, because we loan money to governments and fund their projects, but also to the dialogue that we encourage with governments at national level. We will work to ensure your voice is heard, not only in our projects, but also at that national level policy dialogue. I'd like to come back to you on a couple of recommendations which I believe are particularly important from the aspects of our country programs. So on ensuring the meaningful participation of Indigenous peoples in the design, implementation and monitoring of evaluation of IFAD's strategies, projects and programs at all levels, very much yes to this, and we've already set the ball rolling. By the end of 2023, we shall have 45 IFAD country and multi-country offices across the world, with country directors located in the field and even regional directors located in the field. And we've already seen positive outcomes in terms of our engagement at country level with all our partners, including Indigenous peoples, by having an in-country presence. We hope to build on this, and we will therefore see it as a key opportunity to facilitate more regular dialogue between IFAD country programs and key stakeholders, including Indigenous people representatives. We have many new country directors in IFAD, and I will certainly ensure that they are all sensitized on the new direction that IFAD's updated policy on engagement with Indigenous peoples, and I will take account of the regional action plans that will be developed and finalized after this forum to ensure that they are also very aware of those as they develop projects and country strategies with governments. And on your recommendation of investing in building the capacities of Indigenous peoples, this is something we're very committed to. As you know, we have committed to at least 10 new projects in IFAD 12 with a specific focus on Indigenous peoples, but I'm pretty certain that we will end up doing more than that. And I hope that as we reflect on these projects, I'll be able to come back and report to you how they have also built the capacity of Indigenous peoples. We are also looking for approving a new grant for the Indigenous Peoples Assistance Facility to provide more resources to not only capacity building, but in micro initiatives that support Indigenous peoples. We are committed to ensuring that representation of Indigenous peoples among our staff in offices is something that we're looking keenly towards. And I'm pleased to announce today that IFAD will fund a specific internship program for Indigenous peoples starting this year in Latin America and the Caribbean region, so we can learn the lessons as we implement the internship program. I'm also supportive of the recommendation to IFAD to play a role in creating the space for Indigenous peoples to participate in policy processes. My concern is particularly at the national level and ensuring government creates space for your voice. We are strengthening IFAD's own capacity to engage in policy dialogue at a country level. And in this context, we are committing to ensuring your voice is also heard. IFAD also supports your desire to bring Indigenous people to the decision-making table, particularly at national level, and we will work with you to ensure that governments respond positively. However, I do want to highlight the underlying fact that IFAD's principal product for supporting sustainable, inclusive rural transformation is the loans we provide to government for their programs. These are not IFAD projects, they are government programs and projects. And we need to work with you to use these platforms to engage with governments. Ultimately, we are partners with governments and we work primarily through governments. And so to some extent, this determines how much we can do to create the space for stakeholders, including Indigenous peoples. But let me reassure you, we're very committed to your voice being heard. As we look forward, my hope is that IFAD's decentralization process will be a real game changer for the organization. Having IFAD's operational staff located within countries should make it possible for IFAD and Indigenous peoples to have a much closer day-to-day dialogue. And I note in your recommendations the talk of quarterly meetings and other more regular dialogues. And as I say, by having staff in country, this becomes much more practical. And it will make it possible for us to better understand each other's perspectives and identify concrete opportunities for collaboration at country level. Finally, let me reiterate that IFAD's partnership with Indigenous peoples is one that we in IFAD are strongly committed to, and we want it to be about actions as well as words. And we will look forward to responding to the recommendations to the best of our ability. And we hope that from your side, you can also be advocates for the partnership with IFAD. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Donald. And with that, we now have come to the time for exchanges with governors and executive board representatives. So please let us know if you would like to take the floor for a question or a comment. I don't see any requests for the floor. Oh, sorry. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I would like to thank the Associate Vice President for especially saying that the loans that go to the countries, so you will ensure that it is going to be more utilized for the Indigenous people. I come from India, and again, not India, from a state called Jharkhand in India. And it's the need of the hour, and for whatever reasons, the funds that have gone there has not been utilized so much, and obviously that much funds actually is, as per our understanding, is not required, but it is, the development is not there. So thank you very much for including this point, and hopefully we'll see something good happening very soon. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. And then Nigeria, please.
Thank you very much, Vice President and other leaders of IFAD and the indigenous people. My name is Muhammad Abubakar from Nigeria, Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development. This is my first time attending the meeting of the indigenous people, although this is the 6th year. This is really an excellent concept and initiative. We have been missing the point all these years. The knowledge, the science, everything about the environment, about climate, about agriculture has been with the indigenous people. The indigenous people are not just part of nature or part of environment. They are a blend of nature and themselves, and they have tremendous knowledge. I think we have just done the right thing and doing the right thing to involve them. But more than just having people come here, I think it has been mentioned, I just simply want to reiterate. You know, it's often said, tell me, I will forget, show me, I'll probably remember, involve me, I will understand and contribute and even improve. So every step of the way, I would like to say we must carry out this initiative of involvement. That's the only way that we will also gain knowledge. They have more knowledge. In fact, more knowledge than 20, 50 years of research because they have been part of the nature itself. So this is an initiative and I welcome it. I'm very happy that I'm here and I will be willing to participate in any way that I can. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Other governors, or you're very far away, so it's hard to see you. Yes, Canada, go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And it's really an honor to be here and to hear the results of your deliberations. Such rich discussions I know took place. And this this forum is really a model and a necessary dialogue with the indigenous people for IFAD to do its job and to do its work and really reach where it needs to go. But it's not only for IFAD. I think the discussions that you take place really have value to inform other RBA's work and also other international fora, in particular on this critical issue of climate change. The recommendations have highlighted issues for supporting Indigenous leadership in climate action at the national, regional, and global levels, including meaningful engagement in decision-making and capacity building. And I think we can learn from IFAD what meaningful engagement means. Two things were mentioned. The importance of the relationship and building and integrating and working with the governments where IFAD works well. And I think that's an area, as Donald has said, can be strengthened and look at ways to do that. The second thing I would say is the importance of scaling up the ideas that come out of the projects and work and the learnings. And that's certainly something that Canada will look to help to support. So thank you again for this opportunity to engage and to hear about your deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Canada. Other speakers? If not, I think it's time for us to move forward in our program. I just don't want to make sure that I haven't ignored anyone's request for the floor. Okay, thank you. Without further interventions, then I would like to welcome IFAD's Vice President, Mr. Dominic Ziller, for some closing remarks.
Yeah, thank you, Satu, and dear friends. This is really a great pleasure for me and an honor to participate once more in this Indigenous Peoples Forum. Like for Donald, it's the third time for me, twice as Vice President of IFAD and once before as German governor, where I was sitting, or now the Nigerian minister is sitting. And I think that we have some board members and the governor here demonstrates also that this Indigenous Peoples Forum is also recognized by our member states and that there's interest. This forum has become big, I must say, over these 3 instances that I was able to participate and to observe it. And it already starts with the fashion that we have on the ground floor of IFAD. In the morning when people come in, you can immediately hear them saying, yeah, the forum must take place because we have all these fashion articles and accessoires on display here. They're interested, they buy things. You can see them having the purses, having the hats. That is really good. We had a very productive preparatory meeting with Myrna and her fantastic team, the steering committee. You have had the opportunity to talk to the Pope. I think all that demonstrates that this forum is really developing, is getting traction. Also, the interaction with the other Rome-based agencies starts. And I'm pleased that IFAD is the one who is catalytic on this one. We are the only organization that has such an organization and an institution that is hosting such a forum. And I think others should follow suit and should also be prepared to do what we are prepared to do, to really keep learning from you and keep working with you. And therefore, it was very important for us to receive your messages today, for the different IFAD representatives to participate in your deliberations over the last few days. We have heard strong proposals with the strengths rooted in you being members of your communities, proposals for development pathways that are truly sustainable and truly in harmony with nature. It has been said several times already today that you are the ones who have the best understanding of how to develop in harmony with nature. I also would like to underline that we have recently updated our policy on the engagement with Indigenous peoples. And in particular, we have the new principle of engagement on food sovereignty and nutrition security. And we have an observer status of Indigenous people to the IFAD Executive Board, among other things. Climate was a major topic, and we uphold Indigenous people's climate leadership, goes without saying. We know that there's still a lot of work to be done. We know that Indigenous people have historically been excluded from the decision-making tables. And this happens in democracies where there's always a risk that the majority outvotes the minority. It also happens in more authoritarian regimes where the leaders, even if it's authoritarian, need the support of the majority of the population, but probably not of each and everybody. So we think we are committed to the leave no one behind principle. We are committed to inclusivity. And we also know that also minorities can bring a lot to the table. So it's not only to leave no one behind, it's also stupid if you leave people behind who can add value and who can bring particular specific knowledge to the table. At the start of the forum, our president has very clearly expressed our recognition of the central role that you are playing in addressing climate change. The world is on the brink of an existential crisis. A crisis, and that's what also makes me a bit more optimistic, that will hit everybody. So this is something where maybe multilateral cooperation for once works a bit better and a bit more quickly than on many other issues, because only if we work together we can stem this tide of destruction that we're facing. Pope Francis has reaffirmed the importance of reimagining development through listening, through learning, through respecting the environment. He invited us to embrace Indigenous peoples' buen vivir and to uphold the wisdom and harmony that they're teaching to us. I understand that there were important exchanges of knowledge and experience at the regional meetings and events on the topics of biodiversity, access to land, and the Indigenous Peoples Assistance Facility, just to name a few. These discussions will also help us to shape IFAD's interventions and our advocacy. And Donald has mentioned the role that our decentralization is playing here. I think that will make it a lot easier for us to be closer to you. So, dear friends, there's no corner of the earth which will not be impacted by climate change. It is already affecting food systems, lives and livelihood the world over. The paradox is that while indigenous people have contributed the least to this catastrophe, you are the ones on the front line today. You are the ones that are often hurt more directly and also more dramatically than others. This is why we recognize the importance of supporting and advocating for indigenous people as we work to adapt to and mitigate the effects of climate change. Our partnership with the Coalition on Indigenous Peoples' Food Systems will continue to grow in this direction. So let me conclude by affirming IFAD's commitment to keep the momentum going. We will make every effort to translate your deliberations into meaningful, timely, and concrete actions, and every effort to implement the updated policy on engagement with indigenous peoples and the Indigenous Peoples Assistance Facility. I also was particularly happy to hear that you support our replenishment and that you will fight at our sides to see to it that we get a high replenishment. IFAD is in a crucial situation here. SDG 2 is the SDG where we are lagging behind the most. It's a question of credibility for the whole international community. IFAD is the agency that is specialized in fighting hunger, doing rural development. So we are the ones that need to receive the funds needed to accomplish SDG 2, and any support that we can get on that way will be extremely helpful. On behalf of the President and myself, I would like to thank each one of the IFAD colleagues responsible for organizing this 6th global meeting. Thank you, and congratulations for a job well done. Thanks also to all our partners, and I have a list here, and the first one is Spanish. I don't speak Spanish, so it's a bit of a challenge. Centro para la Autonomía y Desarrollo de los Pueblos Indígenas. I hope that was good. Then we have the International Indigenous Women's Forum, the Global Home for Indigenous Peoples, the Manyoito Pastoralists Integrated Development Organization, the Partners in Community Development Fiji, the Samburu Women Trust, Tebteba, the Indigenous Peoples International Center for Policy Research and Education, the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, SIDA, and the International Work Group for Indigenous Affairs. Lastly, I would like to thank all delegates and representatives of the indigenous communities and all the participants. We value your partnership and your insights. Together, we can help nourish biodiversity and enhance resilience to create a thriving world. My best wishes to all of you. It was an honor to participate in this, and I hope to see you all again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dominic. And we are now reaching the end of our meeting. Before we go for the closing ceremony, I'd like to invite Ilaria Firmian, who's Senior Technical Specialist on Indigenous Peoples at IFAD, to take the floor for some final announcements.
Thank you very much. Before the final announcement, I would really like a long round of thank you. And I would like to start with the steering committee of the Indigenous Peoples Forum at IFAD, because for as much as they co-led with us the development of the updated policy, they also co-led the creation of this forum. So thank you very much to the steering committee. I would like to thank also on the ECG side. First of all, I'd like to thank the core team, is Margherita, Lorenzo, Carla, Valeria, Paola, Livia, Felicia, Enzo, and Manuel. Also Valentina and Natalia who supported on the financial part. To all the colleagues in the ECG division, first of all, Antonella and Mattia for their guidance, and to all who supported us by demonstrating a truly integrated approach. So colleagues in the gender team, the youth team, the nutrition team, and the climate team. In particular, Oliver Page for his huge support. And a big thank you also to Francesca and Stella. Big thank to all our partner organizations. The Vice President has already mentioned them. They supported all the work for the regional consultation. So I'll go for the acronyms, CADP, FIMI, PIDO, SWT, TEBA, PCDF, and also, of course, SIDA and IFGIA. I also want to thank all the colleagues in the regional divisions, in particular the regional directors, country directors, hub manager, and IFAD country offices, indigenous peoples focal points of the regional division, namely Klaus, Shirley, Ilaria, Philippe, and Anne, who actively participated in the regional working sessions, both in Rome and remotely. And I want to thank also the note takers of the regional parallel sessions, Raul, Luna, and Irene. Thank you also to colleagues from other divisions, from GPI to Treasury, such as Federica, Carmina, Seiko, Tara, Margherita. I want to thank colleagues. It would be a huge list, but we thank Brian for coordinating and all the teams who collaborated. Secretary's office for the extensive support, Deidre, Flavia, Veronica, but just to name a few. Also, we thank language service, including the translators and the interpreters. Ex-IFAD staff volunteering for the marketplace, Antonella, Carla, Fiorella, and Gisella. We also thank Matteo and the team for all the IT-related services. We thank colleagues from administration services, in particular facilities and management and travels and visa sections, among other Katie, Connor, Roberto, and Monica. We thank the messengers, Anna Chiara and Natalia. We thank the photographer Flavio. We thank all colleagues of security and also all colleagues in GEMO for support, Alessandria for printing and mail services, Ed and management staff for all the catering services. And for all this work in the many IFAD divisions, all the colleagues in the AVP's front office and in the office of the president and vice president and protocols, and of course, all IFAD senior management for that. And the partners, here, the International Land Coalition, their own-based agencies for the collaboration, and the indigenous partnership, in particular, Frank and Andrea. And I hope I'm not forget anyone. So a big round of applause just to show that it. I know it's a long list, but I think it's important to see that behind this 6th global meeting, there are really many, many collective efforts. And now to celebrate the closure of this 6th global meeting and the hard work that you have all put in, we will move into the main hall, so in the foyer upstairs, where you can enjoy a drink, some delicious Mexican food and musical entertainment, and have some more cultural exchange. So thank you very much.
Thank you,
have a good
Ilaria.
evening. I see a big message,
but Ilaria, we will have the closing ceremony here first? Or
yeah, first the closing ceremony, of course.
Yeah, so don't go yet. So thank you very much, Ilaria. And thank you everyone for participating. I think what Ilaria just has listed is just a testimony to what a huge joint effort this has been among the many stakeholders, but also so many within IFAD. And I'm reminded of the opening ceremony where the thought of us all being one came through very strongly. So I think this list of everyone who's been involved really is a testimony to us being all one. And with that, now it's time to invite Yun Mane to lead us through the closing ceremony. I'm having difficulty reading the, is this an important message? Oh, okay, thank you, message. Okay, go ahead, Yun Mane.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, on behalf of the steering committee and my indigenous sister and brother here, I would like to express my gratitude and express appreciation to the IFAD and the supporter, especially the indigenous sister who have been, supporting, and also the IFAD indigenous people team that you have been working very hard, and wonderful and excellent work to support our indigenous people in this world, especially to organize this kind of global forum. We recognize on your support, especially we recognize your hard working, and working by heart to support our indigenous people. We hope that, this is the role model that can be replicated to the other UN agency to support our indigenous people. So it is my great honor to invite my indigenous elder, sister and brother from the region, Mirna, please, and Davasis, Joanne, and also Tadasis, Olais, Joseph, Coleman, please come to the floor. And also I would like to invite Mr. Vice President and Ms. and Mr. Associate President and the indigenous IFAD team, Ilaria, Antonella, and our former supporter, Marty, also please come to the floor to join our closing ritual ceremony. So I'm going to give you the stick, and then please follow me to put the stick on the rice wine, the jar rice wine, and then you will pray in your own language, in your own wish, to our spiritual ancestor, to our spiritual land, forest, water, and mountain that have been provided the guardianship, to our life and also to Mother Earth. Yeah, so I'm now passing this stick to everyone. Please have it. Yeah. Can you, yes. Okay, I will pass, yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. And now I would like to invite Mirna, please light the candle one. Yes. Yes. And then you can pass to Mr. Vice President. Yeah. Yes, please.
I'm sure.
Yes, please. Yes, please, this one, yeah. Yeah, and I would like Joanne, please, you, anyone, yeah. And please give to me, thank you. Since we have too many people, I think we can start with the team from here first, and then please do like this, and then pray to our spiritual ancestor, spiritual forest, land, mountain, water, in your own language, in your own ways. Yes, please join me. Thank you. Yes, yes, please. Yeah, yeah. Ri kep nar a kep tan bơ lệ prah neh prah to prah pri prah trak ri kal mat kal chang pol renoi de I tu tem phop lok ya an pang an beh an lang ri kal mat kal changដើម្បីan pang man beh an lang kal mat kal changដើម្បីan ke tak ke peng ke neh to ma ri chieng jenap chit an pnong ya an po renoi de ya an thơi jenap prah ri prah kal mat kal chang he ya an beh an lang ri an kal an mat kun jang po renoi de he ya ri kep tan prah neh prah to prah pri prah tak prah neh prah to prah mie prahយកprahទាំងលែកទ្រមយ៉ាកលមាត់កលច្រាំងពលហេយ៉ាអនអនឡាំងរីប្រះអេ Yes, thank you. So now we can finish with that one. So let me try to pray in my own Punong language a little bit more, and then ri kaptan mbah prah neh prah to pri tak ri an kal mat kal jrang bol noi de ya pang han chen kat ya tang let ma pa ri an pang kal mat kal jrang ha an chen chieng neh to pri tak le an pu in pu ton an khan pang I pri pu ya kal mat kal jrang nào ri nào chieng bol noi de ne an beh an lang ri pra e. Yeah. So now I would like to give this to you, yeah, for your good luck, yeah. Di kapten tetak jet prah, di kalmat kal jrang, pol renoi de ya an beh an lang ri, an chen kal chenap, lut an pu nut mat ri kap kal le, prah neh prah to prah pri prah tak prah yok an kalmat kal jrang he ya an beh an lang ri prah e. So Mirna, he also would like, but I need to put this on you. Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you. And one more last time. Ri kaptan bah neh prah to prah yuk prah prak kal mat kal jrang po renoi de ya an pang chen kar an chieng chinap kal mat kal jrang pri thak le ta an pu in an thơi han china an pu kal jrang neh jrang to jrang thak le ta an pu in le ta an pu choi nào ri prah e an khan pang ya nu hom pang kal po renoi de ya tang le ta tru hop lok ya an beh an lang ri prah e. Yeah. So I would like to give Mr. President. Yeah, this is for you. Yeah, good luck. Yeah, thank you. So now I would like to invite my brother Davasis to summarize the meaning of our closing ritual ceremony, especially the meaning of the rice wine, the candle, the light of candle, especially the mix of the seed here with rice and flowers, and also the water, please.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
As indigenous peoples, we have our spiritual beliefs, traditions, and practices. Whether or not we also conform to one or more of the different mainstream religions and faiths, we believe that living beings and inanimate entities both possess spirits. I move on to the physical objects that you see in front of you. Some of these wrought over here symbolize our harmony with nature and the spirits. Our rice wine from Cambodia, Nepal, I think, at least I know Bangladesh is also there, symbolizes power, energy, vitality, and strength. The mixed variety of seeds represent life, procreation, diverse and bountiful produce, and all necessary resources. The rice represents our food, nutrition, and fuel, and our enjoyment of life. The other objects are related to the things mentioned earlier in different synergetic ways. With this special closing ceremony, on behalf of our Indigenous sisters and brothers gathered here at this global forum from around the world, we invite all our Indigenous ancestors, spirits, and the spirits and deities of water, land, forest, and mountain, our guardians and caretakers, to visit us here today at this global forum in Rome, Italy. We call upon them to shelter us under a protective and healing umbrella, to instill good faith to our sisters and brothers from the indigenous peoples, from IFAD, and all other participants at this forum, including the governing council and country delegations. We offer hereby to our spiritual ancestors and deities our rice wine, drinking water, seeds, and candles, symbolizing our gratitude to our spirits and Mother Earth for providing us with bountiful landscapes, life forms, animals, and plants. We seek their blessings to enable us to protect and maintain our holistic wisdom, knowledge, and practices on the conservation and sustainable use of land, forest, and biodiversity, along with their resilience. May the spirits bless our advocacy and struggles with success to preserve and revitalize our knowledge in promoting and enhancing resilience and biodiversity. May the spirits bless us to enable us to continue strengthening the partnership between IFAD, Indigenous peoples, and member states of the United Nations to help us advance jointly towards a just, sustainable, biodiverse, pluralistic, and peaceful world. Lastly, may the spirits bless us all with good health, long lives, prosperity, and a safe trip back home. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so we are now finished our closing ritual ceremony. So again, on behalf of Steering Committee of Indigenous People, I would like to express my appreciation for your kindly join the ritual ceremony. So we wish you all the best. Continue our engagement to support my Indigenous people in this world. Thank you for positive change. Thank you. Yeah. You want to try? Yes, you can. Yeah. You want to try?
Actually drink.
Yes, please. Yeah. The position, please. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Hilaria. Yeah.
4 or 5?
5. I think 5. Yeah. The buses. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.